Hello everyone and welcome to Mountain Lake Journal. I'm Tom Hellick. This week, a major shakeup in the political landscape. After 41 years of public service, North Country Assemblywoman Janet Duprey announced this past week that she will not seek re-election this coming fall.
I assure you, I fully intended to be on the ballot this November. Sometimes the most difficult discussions we need to have are with ourselves. For the past several weeks, I've done a considerable amount of soul searching, and although I generally consider myself a very decisive person, I've been anything but quick to make a decision. I have finally listened to my inner self and to my wonderful and caring family. And this is the right time for me to end my 41-year political career.
It wasn't easy, but in recent weeks, Janet Duprey says her health started factoring more into her decision. She's been diagnosed with glaucoma, and it's beginning to affect her vision and ability to drive, especially at night and in bad weather. So reluctantly, this past week, after a decade in the New York State Assembly, she decided she'll retire at the end of the year.
In order to assure the selection of a candidate to run, I had to make the decision now. Waiting any longer is simply not an option.
Duprey says she's looking forward to spending more time with her husband and grandchildren. She was elected to the Assembly in 2006 after serving for 30 years as a lawmaker and treasurer in Clinton County, and through the years praised by many of her colleagues from both sides of the political aisle for her hard work and dedication.
She's had a lot of commitment to the people of the North Country. You get in a position like that, and there's an awful lot of desks, there's an awful lot of formality, there are a lot of movers and shakers you need to work with, but Janet never forgot the people.
Quite a change from 1975, when she made history being the first woman and the youngest lawmaker ever elected to the county legislature. She still recalls the words of a fellow legislator who made it clear she wasn't welcome.
I will tell you that the first night I walked in January of 1976 to get sworn in, one of my colleagues walked up to me and said, "I guess we should congratulate you, but let me make it clear. We don't want you here. You don't belong here. We will get rid of you in 2 years."
Now, 4 decades later, as she looks back over her career in politics, Duprey says her most gratifying accomplishments have included passing a law requiring insurance companies to cover treatments for individuals with autism, and the passage of the marriage equality bill. After initially opposing gay marriage, over time, she changed her mind.
In my heart, I knew it was the right vote.
5 years later, and now at the age of 70, Duprey says it was time once again to follow her heart.
Today is the most difficult day I faced in my 41-year political career. This decision has been a struggle for me, but I am at peace with it.
And Janet Duprey joins us now. Welcome.
Thank you, Tom.
Nice to see you. When you announced your retirement last week, you said you were all ready to run. In fact, a few weeks earlier, when a challenger had jumped into the race, you put out a statement saying that you were going to run a vigorous campaign.
Yes.
So what happened over the past few weeks that changed your mind?
Well, my family kind of interceded a little bit, particularly my daughter. Michelle, she's my miracle child, and we're very close, but she felt very strongly, said to me, "Mom, you're 70. When do you stop working 60, 70, 80 hours a week?" And, I've had many people say to me I could stay on for another 2 years and work less hours. And Tom, no, I couldn't. It's not my DNA. I'm going to go to every event I can go to, and I'm going to do everything I can do, and it's what I love doing. And I really do. It's a bittersweet decision, a very, very difficult decision for me. But, and I mentioned the other day, last week when we talked about it, that I've been married 48 years, almost 49 years. I've been elected for 41 of them. Yeah. Elmer's been retired for 15 years, and it's time. It was tough to get there, but and I was diagnosed several years ago with glaucoma, and although I'm doing well, and my doctor says that it's fairly stabilized. Driving at night is tough, and particularly in Albany, with the amount of traffic, and if it's raining or snowing or foggy, I don't feel as safe as I did before, And I had to come to grips with that. And when I put that out 2 more years, I just can't be sure I could stay 2 years. And if I can't stay 2 years, I'm not going to do it.
At your news conference the other day, you were asked about the highlights of your Assembly career and the accomplishments you're proud of. You mentioned passing the law that requires insurance companies to cover treatment for individuals with autism.
Yes.
Including your grandson.
Including my grandson. We were fortunate. Jeremy was always covered under his dad's insurance policy, but the majority of insurances did not cover, particularly the early intervention programs, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech, which are so critical to get these children where they can mainstream by the time they get into school. And for adults, it was not recognized as an illness. So they were not covered with insurance. And, we're at that point now with Jeremy. And, the day that I announced my retirement last week was Asperger's Syndrome Day in the state, and he turned 22. And fortunately, because of this legislation, he now does have his own insurance. So very, very important. Just huge satisfaction to have that. Thousands of people benefited from that.
You also mentioned passing marriage equality. Like many lawmakers, you had opposed same-sex marriage for a number of years before, as you say, coming down on the right side of history. What changed your mind?
Meeting people, talking with people. Jeff McCormick Cook was one of the first who came to see me out of New York City and talked to me about the more than 1,300 legal provisions that were denied through civil unions, because that's where I was. I said civil unions, not marriage. That's not equality. I've always been a civil rights person. I'm a child of the 60s, and I have always defended women's rights and racial rights. And this became a question of me looking at it and saying, equal but different is not civil rights. And so I separated it from the religion. If two people love each other and they want to be together and they want to be married, what right do I have to deny them of that opportunity? And so it was a really easy decision at that point.
When asked about the highlights of your career, you also mentioned honoring the corrections officers and state police who led the 3-week manhunt for the 2 escaped killers who broke out of Clinton Correctional a year ago. That was a proud moment?
It was an incredibly proud moment for me and for them, which is nice. It was just an honor for me to be able to recognize them. It was a well-deserved honor. And then the following week, Major Chuck Guess, who I've just come to respect so much. And there was a lot of pushback, as you know, and I heard it often down there. They're long gone, they're in Canada, they're in Mexico. What a waste of tax dollars to continue with all the 1,500 law enforcement people who were here, 16 different agencies. And Major Guess just intuitively was sure they were here and maintained the course. And so the opportunity to say that on the floor and for people to recognize his expertise, and then of course Jay Cook. You can't say enough about Jay Cook. Ice in his veins to be able to cool and calmly run over 100 yards, more than the length of a football field, stop and shoot from 40 or 50 yards away, and capture sweat, not kill him. That takes a very unique and very highly trained individual.
Everyone is still waiting on the Inspector General's report on the Dannemora escape. Are you anticipating that it may identify deficiencies within the prison or the correction system? And are you hopeful, if so, the legislature will look at reforms? And are you hoping that will happen before you leave office?
I'm certainly hoping the report comes out soon so that not only it's before I leave office, but that I have the time to work with the corrections officers, with the administrators, the superintendents, particularly at Clinton. We have ongoing discussions. I think we already have recognized some of the concerns from the escape, and they're being addressed. There are certainly many changes. One of the biggest concerns, Tom, is what we do so well in state government is we swing the pendulum way too far, because we also have to continue to be focused on the fact that safety and security for our correction officers is paramount, and for the inmates and for the civilian staff too. But we can't go so far that we don't keep that safety and security piece at the top of the list. I think that there will be recommendations. I hope they're recommendations that are reasonable. I hope that there are answers to some of the questions we still have about how, why, when.
In the final months, as you finish out your term through the end of the year, is there any one issue that you're still hoping to tackle or resolve?
My top one, and I don't think it's going to happen, would be the death with dignity bill. And again, I know it's controversial. That seems to be what perhaps is going to be one of the words that follows me into retirement. But I feel I'm very strongly committed. I'm a co-sponsor of it. Was one of the first co-sponsors. My dad died of mesothelioma. Horrible death. Nobody should ever die that way. And it was incredibly painful. We had hospice. They were great, but there was no relief. My mom, 5 years later, made the decision to have her feeding tube pulled. And she was certainly very alert. Her mental capacity was at 100%. In fact, a doctor came in a few days later and wanted to reinsert it. And although she was having a little trouble talking at the time, she wrote a note and said, "I simply want to die. Edna C. Lacey." It took 11 days, Tom. And I never left her side. But that was incredibly difficult. Although she was mentally sound, her body had just given out. She was getting totally incapacitated, which is something she had a lot of pride. And she said to me, she wanted to die with dignity. I don't know if either of my parents would have taken and made a decision to take medication to expedite those last days. I will never know that. But I firmly believe they should have had that option. I don't think we're there yet, and I don't think it will get to the floor this year. If it does, I don't think it will. I really don't. I don't think that we'll see it pass this year. I would hope over the next few years that we see a good, solid bill and that it happens.
Janet Duprey was facing a challenge this fall from Democrat Billy Jones, who was chair of the legislature in Franklin County. And just this past week, after Duprey's announcement, Kevin Mulverhill, who was the sheriff in Franklin County, announced he plans to run as a Republican in the 115th district race. And he'll have the backing of Duprey, who says she thinks it's important for the North Country to keep a Republican representative in Albany to offset the liberal Democratic majority from New York City. But she also says her successor needs to be a moderate and not far to the right, like some of her primary challengers in recent years. She talks more about that as our conversation continues online. We also ask her if the ethics scandals that have rocked Albany played a factor in her decision to leave the Assembly. You can watch those bonus clips from our extended interview on our website at mountainlake.org.